Hello, good morning. Welcome to California High-Speed Rail Authority's Station Delivery Support and Technical Planning Services pre-bid. Next slide, please. My name is Alice Rodriguez. I'm going to be the moderator today. I'm the Deputy Director of External Affairs. Once I'm done with a few slides, I'm going to turn it over to Meg Cederoff, the Director of Planning and Sustainability, and she's going to give us a project overview. Following her remarks, Ashley Missler, our Small Business Advocate and Program Manager, will give us a small business program overview. Following that, Meg will join us again to give us a procurement overview. And then finally, Lisa Crowfoot, representing our legal office, will give us an organizational conflict of interest overview. Next slide, please. Okay, some resources for you. The Station Delivery Support and Technical Planning Services webpage link is listed there on the page. But the path to get there, if you start from our homepage, hsr.ca.gov, if you select business opportunities, and then under contractors, select Station Delivery Support and Technical Planning Services. This webpage will include a video from today's pre-bid, this PowerPoint, a list of all the registrants from today's event, and responses to any questions and any updates to the RFQ. Submit questions to stationplan@hsr.ca.gov and note that this is a new email address. And then those questions are going to be due by January 12th. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Meg.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us as we walk through some of the details around the Station Delivery Support and Technical Planning Services contract. I want to provide you all with a little overview of the California High-Speed Rail program just to kick off this morning. So next slide. And just as by way of introduction, I'm the Director of Planning and Sustainability for the Authority, and the Planning Technical Services contract and Station Delivery contract work occurs underneath my team and is a vital part of delivering a functional high-speed rail system to the state of California, as shown here on this slide. So as many of you will be aware, the mission of California High-Speed Rail is to initiate construction of a true high-speed rail dedicated passenger rail system along a dedicated grade separated alignment, and use technology that's capable of sustained speeds of greater than 200 miles per hour, which is a tremendous asset in terms of the transportation network in the state of California. On the map, you'll see the project overall and statewide is divided into phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is roughly 500 miles from San Francisco all the way to the LA Basin and Anaheim, whereas phase 2 provides 2 segments up to Sacramento and then down to San Diego. Right now, the High-Speed Rail Authority is focused on the delivery of the phase 1 segment, with the other phases sometimes being work undertaken by other partners. Next slide. You can see we've further divided the overall phase 1 segment into kind of core geographic segments that allow us to focus efforts and contracts. The Station Delivery and Planning Support contract will be statewide, just to note. But to start, in the Central Valley, our focus is on a 171-mile segment that will serve as the first operating segment for passenger service. And the goal for that service is to have operations in place by 2030. So that's the end of this decade. That segment will be between the city of Merced and the city of Bakersfield, with a stop along the way in Madera, but more crucially, high-speed rail stations in Merced, Fresno, Kings Tulare, and Bakersfield. We have already have 119 miles of that segment in construction, and this should serve as a test track to commission the first sets of trains at speed. And then we're continuing design work up to Merced and down into Bakersfield. And we've also initiated design work for the 4 high-speed rail stations in Merced, Fresno, Kings Tulare, and Bakersfield, a contract that this set of support services through this RFQ will interact fairly intimately. We are also planning a track and systems and train procurement later in 2023, which is crucial for delivering passenger service on the Merced to Bakersfield segment by 2030. On the next slide, you'll see we are also continuing our focus on Northern California and the Bay Area. This segment completes what we call the valley to valley section of the overall phase one system. So the valley is the Silicon Valley to the Central Valley in Bakersfield. And that segment is 100% environmentally cleared, which is an incredibly valuable milestone in terms of project delivery for the system. We plan to obtain funds to advance design and continue that design work throughout 2023. We've also want to be identifying shared corridor early capital investments, such as the electrification of the Caltrain corridor through San Jose. This allows us to put in place elements that enable high-speed rail service and high-speed rail operations on the corridor while we advance construction of dedicated high-speed rail all the way through to San Jose. Next slide. You'll see we are continuing in the same vein in Southern California, though there is one chunk that needs to be environmentally cleared, though that work should be completed in 2023. So Bakersfield to Anaheim is the focus of the Southern California corridor. We've advanced environmental work between Bakersfield and Palmdale and Burbank to Los Angeles. We are completing the Palmdale to Burbank environmental documents this year, as well as a Los Angeles to Anaheim document as well. So the planning services and station delivery services contract will support work in this area, as well as we continue to work with these communities on important planning activities. And of course, we are working with them to identify shared corridor investments that, similar in Northern California, can advance capital improvements that enable high-speed rail service eventually. Next, let's move on to the next slide. When the citizens of California voted for the initial Bond Act in 2008, it was very much in mind that as California grew, we needed a transportation option that would enable interregional travel at speeds that would begin to connect the state in a way that it hasn't yet been connected. And so the focus was on the Central Valley construction because of some of the funding requirements attached to federal funding we received at the time. And that focus has meant an incredible shift in jobs and economic activity in the Central Valley. I'm sure many people on the webinar remember the late aughts and the kind of global economic meltdown that was ensuing at the time. And the recovery of the Central Valley was slower than other areas of the state. So focusing construction there provided the authority with an area where we could have a very straight test track to test the system at the speeds we need, but also provided an opportunity to reinforce the economy of the Central Valley. And to date, more than 9,900, let's call it 10,000 construction jobs have been created. Those are, that means we have more than 1,000 people working every day on the construction site across 34 active construction sites in that 119-mile segment. And many of these jobs are focused very much on disadvantaged workers, and we keep careful watch on how the investment of the system is benefiting disadvantaged communities in the state of California. We also have an incredibly dedicated, focused program to make sure we're including small businesses in the delivery of the program. Ashley will be speaking in just a minute about that program in detail and how it affects this particular procurement. But overall, to date, we've had more than 750 small businesses employed on the project. And that reflects more than 240 disadvantaged business enterprises, as well as 90 disabled veterans business enterprises. And this environmental, social, and governance focus, this sustainability focus is very much a part of why high-speed rail was voted on for the state of California. It's very much about providing an option for economic development and mobility that provides benefits along the way to these critical communities, disadvantaged workers, as well as small businesses. And also in the end is something that provides tremendous mobility with no environmental cost. The system is an electric system, which has zero emissions essentially. And we've also focused further back within the delivery supply chain to make sure it runs on 100% renewable energy, which means We also will have assets in place that can provide resilience for the system and adjacent communities. But not just focusing on that long-term outcome, we are very focused on what we can do in the delivery of the system now that makes a material change in how mega projects are delivered. We have a dedicated sustainability program that helps to identify, strategize, and put into action all of those activities, including things like requirements in our construction contracts to use equipment, off-road equipment that are the cleanest available tiers, including now electric off-road equipment, which is crucial for reducing the overall impact of the project in construction. And then, of course, the outcome for the state of California is vital when it comes to reducing vehicle miles traveled, which then has a very positive impact relative to greenhouse gas emissions, as well as criteria air pollutant locally. And reducing vehicle miles traveled means taking about 400,000 cars off of the system annually, or it would be like taking all of the cars that are registered in San Francisco County away, which is a tremendous benefit when it comes to reducing congestion overall for the state, while also providing a crucial transportation tool through high-speed rail. Let's move on to the next slide, and I'll transition over to Ashley, who is going to give background on our small business program.
Thank you, Meg, and good morning, everyone. As Meg said, I'm Ashley, and I'm Ashley Messler, and I oversee the small business program and will be your point of contact for all small business needs. My contact information is listed on this slide here. Next slide, please. The authority has a aggressive 30% overall small business goal. 10 of that is for disadvantaged business enterprises, and 3% is for disabled veteran business enterprise. We have a good number of businesses that are already performing on the contract, a total of 752 that come from all over the state, as you'll see on this map here. It actually essentially designates where they're from. But we also have 27 that are performing outside of the state of California. In order to meet your goal and in accordance to the small business program, you will need to designate a small business officer that is responsible for being the point of contact for all things small business related. And that person will work closely with my team, specifically me and my compliance group. For example, if there's a need to host a workshop, or if you'd like to garner some interest for any procurements that are coming up, or put out any task orders that need completed, we can partner with you to get those accomplished. And also, if you're looking for more businesses to do work on the project, you can leverage my team, and they'll be happy to partner with you to do workshops and try to help you find those qualified businesses to perform in the contract. So essentially, once the contract is executed, a small business officer is designated. My team would hold a kickoff meeting to go over the small business requirements a little bit more in detail and answer any questions that come up. Next slide, please. Okay, so the authority committed to diversity, but we're not a certifying agency. We actually partner with a couple of different agencies to utilize their certification designations you'll see listed here on this slide. Anytime that you want to bring a business on board, they have to be certified with these departments here, and their certifications must be current and valid. So you'll want to make sure that throughout the time your small businesses are performing on a contract, that their certifications are continuously up to date. Most of these certs here list about approximately a 1 to 2 year term before they have to renew, but it's their responsibility to make sure that their certifications are current. So you'll see the Department of General Services, they offer the small business certification, the micro business certification, and the new SBPW, which includes firms who specifically work on public works. These are generally larger firms that have graduated out of the smaller business program. So if you have firms that in the past worked on the project, have grown and no longer are able to qualify as a small business, the SBPW is a great option, and it goes up to 36 million gross annual receipts, and they can still qualify as a small business. DGS also offers the Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise, also known as the DVBE cert. The California Unified Certification Program, CUCP, is another cert, which is Disadvantaged Enterprise Certification offered by a consortium of agencies throughout California. Caltrans is the agency in Sacramento that offers this certification statewide. But there are various other agencies that offer this cert, including Bay Area and Southern California, so that businesses are able to choose the agency that's nearest to their region. If you do have any firms that are trying to join your team with this cert, please make sure that you let them know it takes several months to get certified. Other certifications that we accept are the 8A Disadvantaged Business Program certification, and that comes from the U.S. Small Business Administration and the Service Disabled Veteran Owned SB, as well as the Veteran Owned SB, and these come from the Department of Veteran Affairs. Please keep in mind that anything federal is going to take longer to process, but these certifications listed here on this slide are the only ones that we accept, and they do have to be certified at the time they're brought into the contract, during execution, and throughout the duration of the contract in order to get credit for those certifications. Next slide, please. So HSR does not prohibit sub-consultants or subcontractors from being exclusive to one offer, but we do strongly discourage this practice. Next slide, please. Thank you. This slide covers our Connect HSR vendor registry. We do encourage all businesses to register with Connect HSR. It's free, very simple to complete, and it's online, available to you at any time of day. Once we get those applications and they're processed by someone in-house on my team. But it basically, if you send your small businesses to register at this site, they'll always be notified with opportunities and workshops on the project. Oftentimes, we have found that businesses are struggling with certain aspects of being a small business. So we'll hold events and have guest appearances from partnering agencies, such as Department of Industrial Relations, to do workshops on certified payroll. We've also had certified workshops with Department of General Services, as well as Department of Transportation. They'll be actually appearing later on in the small business workshop if you care to join us later from 1 to 2 p.m. today. But there are all sorts of opportunities to bring your businesses on board to this project and to learn about HSR and essentially how we do business. And then also just information in the industry will be listed on the site, and anything that we think that might be of assistance to help your small businesses out. So we do encourage businesses to join and register. If you need more information on getting registered, please reach out to me and I can put you in contact with someone from my team that will help you with that process. Next slide, please. Great, thank you for your time today. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Meg. If you have any questions for the small business program, I will place my email in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Before Meg goes to go over the procurement, I just wanted to address that a few of you have put some questions in the Q&A feature. Unfortunately, all questions need to be emailed, so we can't answer them live here. They can be emailed to stationplan@hsr.ca.gov. So we see that you're asking those questions. Unfortunately, they need to go through that procurement process through the website, or excuse me, through the email address. So again, we see that you've asked those questions, but unfortunately, those do need to be emailed in. Thank you. Go ahead, Meg.
Great, thank you so much for that. So let's dive into a little bit more detail about the scope of work we are looking for, as well as some details about the contract writ large. And I'll also touch on the procurement process and the procurement schedule, just to give you all a little bit of background there. So on the next slide, you'll see the authority planning staff is a very lean team. The state of California, as we have structured the California High-Speed Rail Authority, we've kept in mind the fact that the mission of the authority is to design, build, construct, and then maintain oversight over a high-speed rail system. And so for the next 5 to 10 years, our focus is very much on construction and delivery of that high-speed rail system. And so we are very mindful of the fact that we in the authority aren't just a policy setting organization for the state of California, but we are putting into action plans and activities that and physically shaping space in California at high-speed rail stations, as well as working incredibly closely with local jurisdictions to make sure they have in hand the assets they need, including technical planning assets, in order to implement plans or other activities that accommodate and help deliver the high-speed rail system. So we operate differently than any other state of California agency. To that end, this contract is helping to backfill the authority's planning staff with the necessary technical skills to enable that delivery and planning activities around the high-speed rail stations. So first and foremost, as the name of the contract implies, station delivery support, we are looking for this contractor set of teaming arrangements to supply architectural design support to the planning staff who are managing the design contract for the 4 Central Valley stations. And so we will look for urban design, architectural design expertise in this contract to provide us with day-to-day technical support in the management of that contract for that specific geography. But writ large, this contract is focused across the whole phase 1 system and will be implementing planning technical work and a range of technical analyses across any given area in that space. So some of these technical areas include real estate analyses, market analyses, and support that helps us, the authority, stand up and mature a station transit-oriented development program, similar to other rail and transit operators in the state of California. The authority is incredibly focused on ridership, and ridership, we think, stems with very good planning, including TOD station development at the high-speed rail stations. So some of this work is very much focused on immediate delivery because we are immediately designing and constructing stations. And some of this work happens within a broader array of partnerships with other regional agencies, state agencies, or local jurisdictions. And so there is a range of activities around this activity. We are also mindful of how intimately the high-speed rail stations and other facilities interact with the urban realm. And so we recognize how important it is to have on hand in the authority urban design prowess that helps to communicate the station context. It helps to navigate authority requirements, by which I mean functional rail requirements, as well as a range of scales of transit activities and requirements against local jurisdiction requirements and context in order to really make it all work together to the benefit of the users. And we also want to establish and revise system TOD guidance so that we can work closely with jurisdictions to achieve the look and feel and quality of what we want to bring to the table for high-speed rail stations. This consultant will also help support the authority in some more bread and butter kind of day-to-day activities as well. And so we'll be looking at core activities such as the management of different parcels across the authority's land portfolio relative to their use and development, as well as communicating those outcomes to executives and our board of directors in a range of either committee meetings or board meetings. And we will also, on somewhat like a task order basis, be relying on this contract to deliver transit planning, traffic analyses, active transportation, a range of transportation planning skills with our local jurisdiction partners. I think, as I alluded to, there are times where the authority needs to be very active in the delivery of planning activities at station sites in order for the system to function most efficiently, or for the construction to move forward most effectively. And so the planning skills within this contract will be drawn on in order to achieve that at a range of stations across the phase 1 system. And so behind that, underneath that, we also are looking for this contract to provide modeling, GIS, and other kind of planning analytic technical skills for the authority to help us produce different types of maps or other analyses in order to support these planning activities and to really help our station jurisdictions and other station area issues. On the next slide, I've given you kind of a high-level overview and tried to give you a taste of how the authority works slightly differently than maybe other state of California agencies or other city-based or regional-based planning type organizations. The next few slides will walk through the scope of work, that is detailed in the RFQ and against which we expect teams to bring necessary skill sets in order to deliver this work. Of course, project management is important. We want this to be a well-organized, well-executed contract and set of activities. We'll call it a project. So there'll be just maintaining standard administrative type activities around schedule, budget, human resources, as well as maintaining quality work products and a quality management process for what is being delivered in the project. As I alluded to, we will be looking for this contract to provide planning technical support on an as-needed basis across many different station areas or jurisdictions. And so writ large, we are looking for a range of planning technical activities focused on kind of transportation planning, transit planning, and land use planning. Station delivery is crucial. We are relying on technical assistance to backfill the authority's management team in the day-to-day management of our station design contract. And so we will be looking for core team members to really support us in the delivery of that contract through this work. Next slide. We are also, as I noted, very crucially concerned with transit-oriented development at the station sites. And as we move to design and construction, we want to have underneath that work the technical analysis to understand how the space that the authority owns can and should be organized to be transit-oriented development to enable and catalyze infill development on adjacent parcels owned by the local jurisdiction, or to work in some sort of synergy or joint partnership with other organizations as well in order to achieve ridership, sustainability, equity, and other critical goals that the state of California is very focused on. The system really should serve as an organizing principle for growth in the state of California, but that can only happen if we do very smart planning and development planning at the station sites. In addition, on an as-needed basis, we'll be drawing on this contract to perform a range of transportation planning and transportation plans at station sites. Our jurisdictions with whom we work run the gamut. And as planners sitting on this call, I think you recognize how each jurisdiction is different relative to the depth of its planning bench. And so we rely on this contract to bring to the table technical planning skills that can help local jurisdictions to complete the types of plans, transportation plans, transit access plans, active transportation plans, or other access plans that really make the station a part of the overall network of activities and other plans in the local jurisdiction. Next slide. We are also relying on this contract to provide the authority with real estate analysis and support. Land is an incredibly important asset for the authority. Its sensible use relative to development in the long term is something the state of California has identified as a core value, because this brings riders to the system and, as we noted, helps to allow the system to be an organizing principle for growth in the state. But underneath that, we need key analysis activities around markets and financial analysis and other finally, we are also looking for this group to deliver policy and procedure implementation. While we are different from other organizations, we still do have policies and procedures. And as a somewhat younger organization, we are looking to continue to mature and advance and communicate that across the organization to really put these procedures into practice. We also have guidance, as I noted, urban design guidance, TOD guidance, and other types of grant application support that this team will provide relative very specifically to stations and station areas. Next slide. The contract details include basically, we have a base 3-year contract, so roughly May of 2023 to May of 2026, and then the contract does include 2 one-year extensions. The scope is consistent with our existing activities as well as the program baseline and authority policies writ large. The overall contract budget is $14.2 million, but again, that needs to cover that entire time span, including the 2 one-year extensions. Next slide. The selection process is very standard for us at the authority. We've been engaged in this over the past year very aggressively as we've been moving forward the delivery of the system at large. This is an RFQ, so it is a qualifications-based procurement. So offers are invited to submit to us statements of qualifications, which we will then evaluate in a 2-step process, which is made very clear and explicit in the RFQ document, the criteria we are using to evaluate the SOQs. So a team, an evaluation committee, which is at least 5 members, will be reviewing those SOQs and scoring them. A certain number of highest scoring SOQ offers will be invited to discussions. Some people may call those interviews. These will be in person in Sacramento, notwithstanding anything that happens relative to the pandemic, but the plan is to have them in person in Sacramento. And the final score will be based on both the score for the SOQs as well as the interview scores. So a written and a verbal component to that. We'll then be conducting a sort of review of a pre-award, and then we'll have some limited negotiations with the identified top offerer, and the final contract value will be a result of that negotiation. Next slide. One thing we wanted to flag, and Ashley Missler did a very good job of clarifying for you our small business, disadvantaged business, and DVBE requirements, and those are critical that they are expressed in the SOQs. But we also want to flag that part of our sustainability policy writ large, part of our approach to the procurement of services for the authority is that we require any interested offerer to provide ESG documents, environmental social governance documents. And these can include sustainability reports that are produced according to certain standards, socioeconomic equity policies, governance policies, and these are a pass-fail element of the procurement. So these are required to be submitted. And I'm sure if you have any questions, you can please put them in the question element that my colleague Alice and Lisa will be very clear to clarify for you. I think that's it for my slides. Thank you so much for your time. And now I'd like to hand it over to Lisa Crowfoot to maybe talk a little bit about the key procurement dates and then legal requirements as well.
Sure, thanks, Meg. What you'll see on this slide in front of you are just some of the key procurement dates that we've got scheduled so far. We try to adhere pretty closely to these. Sometimes things do come up, but these are the proposed dates that we're working towards right now. And just to kind of follow up on what Meg just mentioned, yes, any questions and answers should be submitted in writing. The information regarding the email address where to send those questions can be found in the RFQ. And that way we ensure that everybody has the same information because not everybody is able to participate in this call today. If we have it in writing, we will publish that in writing and all potential offers will have access to that same information. Okay, next slide. We can skip past this one. So this is the fun part. Everybody loves to hear from lawyers about conflict of interest policies, but I know it can be complicated. So we wanted to take some time to sort of review this with you all. As you can see in front of you, we sort of have a little bit of a discussion about why we have a conflict of interest policy, and ours is a organizational conflict of interest policy. So what we're really looking at is the various contracts that a particular entity might have within the authority, whether it be 2 or 3 different contracts. And the reason that we have to have this organizational conflict of interest policy is because primarily our federal grants require it. It also helps us to ensure that we've got a fair and transparent procurement process. We want to maximize competition and minimize exposures to bids, but it also ensures that we're in compliance with state and federal procurement laws and regulations. And we've got a little blurb from the Supreme Court here, which just really talks about the concept that we, of course, give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but the law presumes that even the most well-meaning folks could be put in a compromised position if there's a conflict between the person or entity's own interests and the interest of the authority. So that's why we have these requirements. Next page, next slide. The authority's organizational conflict of interest is defined as just roughly put forward in this slide. It's a circumstance arising out of a contractor's existing or past activities, business or financial interests, familial relationships, contractual relationships, or your organizational structure, such as sister or brother entities or your parent entities, that could result in an impairment or potential impairment of a contractor's ability to render impartial assistance or advice to the authority, or affect its objectivity of performing work for the authority. So the importance there is that it's an impairment or a potential impairment. So we're looking at actual conflicts and perceived conflicts from both the standpoint of the contractor, but also potentially third parties looking in. And we also want to avoid an unfair competitive advantage for any contractor bidding or proposing on an authority procurement. And this last point is just kind of what I mentioned. It's the perception or appearance of impropriety that we care about, regardless of whether there is actually such impropriety. Next slide. Examples always help. So here's 2 situations in which an organizational conflict of interest might be found. And they're typical, these are really typical, kind of the most common that we see. You might see a contractor who has an unfair competitive advantage if a contractor might have inside or non-public information about a procurement. For instance, if the contractor assisted the authority in the development of the procurement. Or if a contractor provides any services or receives information about a procurement and then bids on it. So those are things that we look for. An area where a contractor's objectivity in performing its obligations for the authority might be compromised could be where a contractor has 2 contracts with the authority. With contract A, it's in a position to oversee its own work on contract B, and mitigation is not possible. So that's something that we look for. Next slide. A common misperception about our conflict of interest policy is that contractors are generally conflicted out simply because they've worked previously on the project, or they might hold a current contract with the project. And that is not true. The vast majority of organizational conflict of interest determinations of the authority find that a contractor may participate in the desired procurement or contract. Sometimes that's with mitigation or safeguards, and sometimes it's without, depending on the circumstances. And this is because our policy recognizes that our goals have to be balanced against the need to not restrict the pool of potential proposers and bidders available to participate in a procurement. So we work really hard to look at the facts, and we work hard to find a way that contractors can participate in a procurement either with or without mitigation. If a potential conflict is recognized, the policy requires consideration of numerous factors, and that's where our office gets involved. And we will weigh all the facts, and we will determine whether we can implement safeguards and permit participation. And safeguards are commonly applied to allow participation, and they include measures like ethical walls or release of work product to try to level the playing field. Next slide, please. So this is just an overview of sort of what the process will look like. Any interested contractors in this procurement should review section 3.7 of the RFQ regarding organizational conflicts of interest. It covers a lot of the stuff I just told you and explains a little bit more. There's also a link in that section that will take you to the authority's organizational conflict of interest policy. So we expect that you will look through that. And if after reading all of that information, you have any concerns that you may have an actual or perceived conflict of interest, you can ask for a written determination from our office. And the next slide will give you that information once we're done. But note that advanced or pre-clearance is not necessary if there are no concerns regarding an actual or perceived conflict of interest. And so this is not a situation where, you know, a prime consultant is putting together a team, has to get pre-clearance or ask its subs to get pre-clearance from the authority to ensure that they're allowed to participate in the procurement. It is up to the interested contractors to look and see if there's a concern. If there is a concern, then you can go ahead and issue a written request to us, and we'll work with you to develop that determination. And then if there's not a concern on your behalf when you're participating in the submission of the SOQ, all interested contractors are required to submit Form B, which is the organizational conflicts of interest disclosure statement. And on that, you will disclose that you either have nothing to disclose, or if you do, you can include the facts there. And that's really a second opportunity for us to take a look to see if there's any conflict of interest issues that we're concerned with. And if there are any questions about that, you can submit those through the Q&A process as well. Next slide. So this is the information for how to submit a determination if you think there's an issue. Again, if you think there's an issue, go ahead and submit a request here. And our process is that we will receive it. We'll let you know we received it. And then we will do an investigation. So we will probably reach out to you and ask for additional information, such as, you know, what contracts you hold, what work did you do, what do you expect to do on this procurement? And then we will do an analysis and give a final determination in writing about whether there are any concerns, whether we do see a conflict, and whether any mitigation is necessary. And if there's a disagreement, you can always raise any questions back with the legal team through the chief counsel. Next slide. So this slide just sort of has some additional information. If there's questions regarding this procurement, you can send it to this email. This email is also on the website, on the eProcure site. It's also in the RFQ. One thing we want to note, though, is that this address that you're seeing now is slightly different than what we had in the original RFQ, and we're going to be submitting an addendum with the correct email address. And the difference is minuscule, but very important. Inadvertently, we included a period between the word station and plan in the email, and that is not a live email address, so you should have received a bounce back if you sent anything to that email address. If you've sent any emails previously to the authority regarding this procurement, please double check, make sure it was the right email address. And if not, if it was the prior email address, please resubmit those questions to the authority. We want to make sure that we're not missing any of your important questions, and we want to get you all the information that you need. So again, note, this is a new email address. And with that, that is the end of the legal presentation. So thank you so much. Oh, one other point, and Alice, I'm sorry if you were going to point this out, but the presentation, the video, and the list of attendees will be on our website, so folks will be able to get that information.
Perfect. Thanks, Lisa. That was all I was going to say. And just say thank you all for joining us today. And that wraps up our presentation. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.